security forces is how far they have come. From this point onwards, we'll know whether
the next generation, your children, grandchildren, do better.
Hardships, sleeping in corridors, and going out again.
Nostalgia. You know, we all grew up listening to some Bert Canfet on radio, listening to Bert Canfet everywhere we went to. It was like some good luck charm while going to school or going to the office. You just had that good luck tune whistling and having yourself a wonderful day. Excellent stuff, great composition, foreshadowing a great show today. Tonight I will throw a cookie from Bamako to Bangui. Make sure you are in position to pick your portion wherever it breaks. It is the rhythmic drum beats of war that echoes around West Africa. Discordant tunes, if you ask me, from Abidjan to Geneva. Indeed, a resolution was passed to forcefully remove the insurgents from northern Mali. Surprise has been the name of the game. French jet fighters have launched airstrikes on targets in Kidal, Gao and Lere, all in northern Mali. And so, just the way the Malian crisis started, that's how it looks to be concluding. I'm Auro Obo, and this is Global Perspectives. Many had expected the several diplomatic forays and warmongering discussions from Abuja to New York would drive the insurgents to action, but then not this quickly. Last month, the UN Security Council had authorized the Economic Community of West African States to launch an intervention force into northern Mali to regain its sovereignty, even though there were a number of concerns on the deployment of troops. The troops were not expected to be deployed before September, so while ECOWAS intensified efforts in meeting with its collaborators and partners in drawing up a watertight plan in invading northern Mali, the rebels plotted a counterattack. First, they burned several holy shrines in Timbuktu to the consternation of the international community, but then they were not done yet. Last week, when the African Union chairman, President Boni Yayi, met with the Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, beyond the smiles for the camera, there was sharp disagreement. President Yayi said NATO forces should be allowed to contribute to the ouster of the Islamists, like they did in the Afghan war in early 2000.
We are calling on the leaders of all great nations, and the Prime Minister as one of those, to join us and form a global coalition.
President Yayi said we need to react for the simple reason that not only does this issue go well beyond the scope of Africa, but also we must focus on the fact that the scourge of terrorism is an issue for the entire international community. Mr. Harper was not impressed, he said.
The Government of Canada is not considering a direct Canadian military mission. What we are doing and will continue to do, obviously we're providing humanitarian aid to this region.
It was obvious that both leaders disagreed on the real interpretation of the UN Security Council resolution. Riding on the crest of a popular international support, the Malian army retook Douanzé. The central town had been in control of the Islamists for almost a year. The victory was symbolic but then short-lived. Within hours, the Islamists had taken over Kona. The central town was only 400 kilometers from Bamako. Worse still, residents in the town Douanzé told reporters that there was no sign of government troops in the town. By the following day, Bamako was in a state of panic. The government requested for help and the French came calling. For months, French President Francois Hollande had engaged in a war of words with the rebels. At some point, the rebels even threatened to abduct the French leader. As he stood outside the LC, he announced that France's involvement in the Malian conflict was now inevitable.
Fait face à une agression d'éléments terroristes.
Mali is facing aggression from terrorist elements coming from the north, whose brutality and fanaticism is known the world over.
Et le fanatisme. J'ai donc, au nom de la France,
I have therefore, in the name of France, responded to the President of Mali's call for aid, backed by other West African countries.
les pays africains de l'Ouest, les forces armées françaises.
French armed forces have this afternoon lent their support to Malian units to fight against these terrorist elements. This operation will last for as long as necessary.
Cette opération durera le temps nécessaire. J'informerai.
I will keep the French people regularly updated on its progress.
Enfin, le Parlement sera.
Parliament will be appraised of this on Monday. The terrorists must know that France will always be there when the stakes are not its own fundamental interests, but the rights of the population, Mali's people, who wish to live in freedom and democracy.
We have not chosen war. Our choice is peace, more peace and always peace. But they have forced war on us. We will carry out a crushing and massive retaliation against our enemies.
A night of airstrikes by France announced the seriousness of President Hollande in ending the crisis. The French have promised the offensive will last weeks. 4 Rafale fighter jets in the last 48 hours have destroyed rebel training camps and logistics depot in Gao, Kidal and Lere. 550 French troops are in Bamako, and there is the possibility that troops from 4 African countries will be engaged in only days. The response from the rebels has been silence and a withdrawal from Timbuktu and a number of open areas as it anticipates more airstrikes. In Washington, President Obama contemplated the situation. With only a year to the withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan, the United States faces a tricky situation. The Afghan war and the search for the perpetrators of the September 11, 2001 terror attacks had left more than 3,000 troops dead. President Obama has often been quoted as saying the United States was no longer in favor of sending troops to new missions. But then the United States has often harped on the dangerous nature of the Malian conflict. It now contemplates the sharing of intelligence and even the possible launch of airstrikes alongside France. International affairs analysts warn that this offensive to regain northern Mali may have begun prematurely. At least 600 EU troops were expected to arrive in February to train the Malian armed forces will now have to be fast-tracked. Hastening is also the name of the game for 3,000 troops from ECOWAS. In Bamako, it has been uneasy come. The real import of the impending conflict has not yet dawned. The first consequence of the flaring up of hostilities has been the setback to peace talks between the warring parties brokered by Burkina Faso's President Blaise Compaoré. Before last week's fighting, trust had been a major issue between the warring parties. But with the entrance of colonial masters France into the equation, it throws a new beam of light into the crisis, one that no one is sure what the end looks like. Welcome back and over to Bangui, the capital of the Central African Republic. It was the borderline of a military takeover of his government that Francois Bozize walked into this new year. Rebels held the one-time strongman of the Central African Republic by attempting to strangulate his political life. But then, to coin a phrase, a friend in need is a friend indeed. So President Bozize's allies showed up about him saving his government from a spectacular collapse. When Francois Bozize seized power in 2003, he was following a long line of coupists who had ruled the embattled Central African country from independence till date. Central African Republic had gained notoriety when shortly after independence, General John Bokassa seized power and then was inaugurated in a coronation that cost the poor African nation a whopping $20 million, which represented 1/3 of the country's annual budget and all of France's annual monetary aid to the Central African Republic. Emperor Bokassa's government went on to become one of the most brutal and repressive regimes in African history, leaving several thousand dead and many more locked up in detention. Bokassa's exit in 1979 did not mean the end of suffering for the people of Central African Republic. Rather than that, their economic troubles simply worsened. Francois Bozize, unlike Bokassa, wasn't an emperor, but then, typical of many African leaders, he planned a coup in 2003 and then transmuted to a civilian and won 2 successive elections. For a while, it appeared that President Bozize had cured one of Africa's troubled states of cyclical coup d'etats. President Bozize was tactical and shrewd. He brokered a ceasefire deal with a number of rebel groups in the north of the country who wanted a share in the political power. One of the main terms of the deal signed in 2007 was the integration of the rebels into the Central African Republic Army and the payment of allowances to repentant fighters. 5 years on, that deal is off and the rebels constantly threaten to invade the capital Bangui. In the beginning, President Bozize had talked tough, refusing to negotiate with the rebels, and then the rebels returned the favor with a statement of no intention to enter talks with President Bozize's government.
Damara is the last red line that we respect. We are waiting to see what's going to happen in Libreville. We ask that Bozize gives up his power. If he does not leave the Central African Republic, we will always have problems.
In a sweeping move in the first week of January, the rebels were within torching distance of Bangui, and President Bozize remembered his old allies.
Following this meeting, we will surely be able to put in place a national unity government to manage this country, which has suffered so much.
Gabon, Chad, Uganda, and the Congo had aided President Bozize to gain control of the Central African Republic. Nearly a decade later, they were sending in hundreds of troops to protect Bangui, while the leaders of the countries in Central Africa held back-to-back meetings on the sidelines. The period of the talks helped calm tense nerves, and the rebels backed down on the planned invasion of Bangui, leaving President Bozize to heave a huge sigh of relief. Quickly, his government settled down to work in the fine details of the new agreement and arrangement with the rebels, hoping that the truce will hold. The remainder of the region's leaders pat themselves on the back for preventing another regional war. The crises in the Sudan and Congo are often grim reminders of the grave consequences of war on the economy of Central Africa, which takes the rare in Africa's sub-regional development ranking. Last week, John Dramani Mahama was sworn in as the 4th president of the 4th Republic of Ghana, putting the icing on the cake on his journey to the presidential palace. Thousands of Ghanaians made nearly a day-long trip to the Independence Square to listen to President Mahama take the oath of office. On the eve of the inauguration, thousands had made their way to the Independence Square. Several of them from towns as far away as 12 hours from Accra. Most of them spent the night on the stands of the Independence Square. On Monday, January 7, the remainder of this impressive gathering made their way to the Independence Square. The numbers were unprecedented, topping the crowds that had witnessed the late Professor Arthur Mills swearing in 2008. Many made the brisk walk into Ghana's symbol of freedom. It was an atmosphere of gaiety and carnival. The media had dubbed this Ghana's Black Day. In over 2 decades, Ghana's successive peaceful elections had positioned it as one of few successful democratic stories in Africa. On President Mahama's inauguration day, at least 10 African heads of government were present. It was a common message of belief and trust in Ghana's success story.
Continent and the people of Benin, I'm hereby renewing my warm congratulations to President John Dramani Mahama for the confidence that the people of Ghana have just placed in him by electing him as the President of the Republic of Ghana.
72 hours before the inauguration, President Mahama held a State of the Nation address. For 25 minutes, he had told millions of Ghanaians on the need in achieving a common goal of national development. As he mounted the platform to take his oath of office, thousands of supporters cheered him on.
I,
John Dramani Mahama,
do in the name of the Almighty God swear.
Do in the name of the Almighty God swear.
That I will bear true faith.
That I will bear true faith.
And allegiance to the Republic of Ghana as by law established.
And allegiance to the Republic of Ghana as by law established.
That I will uphold the sovereignty.
That I will uphold the sovereignty.
And integrity of Ghana.
And integrity of Ghana.
And that I will preserve.
And that I will preserve.
Protect. And defend the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana.
And protect the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Indeed, the circle had gone a full cycle for John Dramani Mahama. Destiny had thrown in the spotlight only 6 months ago. No one would have thought that soon he will occupy the most important job in his country. A message of change, hope, and belief in the midst of uncertainty appeared apt in toning down the sometimes over-expectant supporter.
The promises that I have made are promises that I intend to keep. But my fellow citizens, change does not happen overnight. And sometimes, despite whatever progress we make, it will appear to be darkest before the dawn of a new day makes that progress visible. In such times, I will be counting on you to maintain the faith and the trust that you have placed in me as president, and I promise I will not let you down.
Seated among the dignitaries and listening with rapt attention was John Jerry Rawlings, the former president of Ghana, who was instrumental to President Mahama's victory. As he makes his way to congratulate his protege, it is with some sense of accomplishment the founding leader of the ruling NPP leads his successor John Kufuor, who only hours to the inauguration appeared to have been prevented from attending the event by supporters of his party, the NDC. The losing party's candidate Nana Akufo-Addo had been defeated for a second successive time. Unable to accept the defeat, he headed to the court, while members of his party boycotted the inauguration. The absence of the NDC supporters at the Independence Square meant little to supporters of President Mahama, whose expectations revolve around improved education and infrastructure.
Our priority will be education and roads in our region and everywhere in Ghana. The Better Ghana Chapter 2 continues under His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, and we are assuring Ghanaians he will deliver, and we want everybody to pray for him and for his government.
Like we put in our manifesto, build more schools, build more infrastructure, prepare for free secondary education in future.
Certainly, he has had a stint for the first 4 years, and he has an idea about what the people of this country need. I think the development agenda must be key as far as human resource development is concerned. I'm talking about schools, quality education, and what have you. I think a few days ago, the former president of this country, Jerry John Rawlings, also mentioned about sanitation problem as one of the worrying areas. I think that this government must address this issue of sanitation and bring a little bit of respite to the people of this country. Health is another area. And finally, I want to look at it that job opportunities should be created for the youth of this country to have a fair share of the national cake. Thank you.
So today, Ghanaians party long into the night. The victory for President Mahama is considered a victory for the entire country and ultimately the entire African continent. Yeah, just about time on my way out. Time for me to bear my mind. Just this week, a number of people asked me what I thought would be the main issues for the year 2013. Somewhat an antithesis to last year in review. Response, I told them, and I must say this, that the task is not one for the feeble-minded. So, do I think that President Bashar Assad's Syria will survive this year? Well, if you ask me, do I know why the Mayan apocalypse eluded all of us last year? But then sincerely, the Syrian crisis fizzled out last year towards the end, and I think the only remarkable progress the diplomatic world made was the resignation of the former UN envoy to Syria, Kofi Annan, and then his replacement by Brahimi Lakmidi. So what has Mr. Lakmidi been up to lately?
This is the problem. The problem is that both sides are not speaking to one another, are speaking across of one another. And this is where help is needed from outside to make sure that everybody speaks about the same thing.
And so my prediction on the Syrian crisis lies with these guys at the UN Security Council, who must find some common ground on the way out of the crisis. If not, it is zilch. So that's the way the cookie crumbles. It's been excellent viewing for everyone around. Make sure you keep those messages coming in the SMS and also on Twitter. Do have yourself a fabulous year. I'm Alva Obo.
And the security forces, this is how far they have come. From this point onwards, we'll know whether
next generation, your children, grandchildren, do better.
Hardships, sleeping in corridors, and enduring aggregate